We got married yesterday. Only people who mattered were invited. Kara's words slid through the phone like a blade, sharp and deliberate. I stood frozen in my living room, staring at the soft pink dress still hanging in its garment bag, the shoes neatly polished beside it, and the carefully wrapped wedding gift waiting on the dining table. Every piece I had prepared for my son's wedding was turned into a cruel joke with a single sentence. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Stories like mine are not just stories. They are lessons carved out of betrayal. I am Tess Marlowe, 68 years old, a retired librarian, and a widow. For decades, I poured every ounce of myself into my only son, Evan. After Robert, my husband, and the love of my life passed away, I made Evan the center of my existence. I paid his rent when he struggled, covered his tuition when he couldn't manage, even drove across town in the middle of the night when his car broke down. Each sacrifice was written, line by line, in the ledger I kept on my kitchen table. That ledger became my silent companion, a book filled not with words of love, but with transactions that proved my loyalty. This evening, that same ledger sat open, a fresh coffee ring marking another page, just one more circle in a history of giving. I traced it with my finger, whispering Robert's name, longing for his calm voice that would have demanded respect where I had only given forgiveness. But there was only silence, broken by the sting of humiliation. The betrayal wasn't just being excluded from Evan's wedding. It was the sneer beneath Cara's voice, the unspoken verdict that I didn't matter. I, who had raised him alone, who had built every step of his life with the bricks of my sacrifice, was erased in one cold breath. On social media, the photos appeared within hours. Cara's family glowing under chandeliers, glasses raised in celebration, cousins and distant relatives gathered in tight embraces. And in every frame, Evan stood beside his bride, his lips pressed thin, his eyes lowered. Never once did he meet the camera with joy. My absence was not an oversight. It was a choice. That night, I couldn't sleep. The pink dress in the closet mocked me with its soft shimmer. I thought of every mother who dreamed of standing proudly at her child's wedding. Instead, I walked my hallway alone, repeating Robert's name like a prayer. My chest ached, but beneath the pain, something new stirred, cold, steady, unyielding. For years I had mistaken sacrifice for love, but as I sat at the table, the ledger open and the coffee ring drying into permanence, I whispered to myself the one word I had never dared to say aloud. Enough. The morning after Cara's call, I pulled the curtains open, only to find the light itself felt heavy. My neighbors waved from across the street, but I couldn't raise my hand. How could I explain that I wasn't at my own son's wedding? How could I admit the truth that the pink dress in my closet had become a symbol of humiliation, that the carefully chosen gift was now a relic of a celebration I was never meant to join? I folded the dress back into its plastic bag, tucked the shoes in their box, and slid the wrapped gift into the drawer. Each movement felt like sealing away a piece of myself. Objects that once held hope now carried shame, and I could no longer look at them without my stomach twisting. The phone buzzed throughout the day with notifications. Each ping was another reminder, another photo, another comment under Cara's perfectly curated posts. What a beautiful wedding. So happy for the Canes. In frame after frame, Her parents and cousins laughed, their glasses clinking in triumph. And there, always beside her, was Evan. His posture was stiff, his smile strained, but he was there. He had chosen to be there without me. I told myself not to look, but I kept scrolling. The deeper I went, the more invisible I became. There wasn't even a mention of me. To them, I didn't exist. By evening, the shame had curdled into anger. Not the kind that bursts out in screams, but the kind that sits cold in your veins, reminding you that silence can be louder than words. I poured another cup of coffee and set it on the ledger, watching the steam curl upward. My hands trembled. Not from weakness, but from the weight of what I was beginning to understand. No amount of giving would ever secure my place in their lives. I whispered into the quiet room. Robert, you would have demanded better. I could almost hear his voice, steady and unwavering. Stand up. That night I did not cry. Instead, I gathered every bill I had paid for them, every receipt, every transfer. The pile grew higher, the pages whispering accusations I had ignored for too long. For years, I had written myself out of my own story, believing love was measured in money and presence was proven by sacrifice. But as I sat there, staring at the evidence of my devotion, I realized the cruelest truth of all. My son and his wife had never wanted me. They only wanted what I could give, and from that moment forward, I promised myself I would give no more. The third night after the wedding, I sat alone in my kitchen, the ledger still open before me. The ink of my own handwriting glared back like a silent indictment. Rent, tuition, down payments, utilities. Every line was a sacrifice, every number a quiet plea for my son's stability. Yet, as I stared, I understood the truth more clearly than ever. Those numbers hadn't bought me a place in Evan's heart. They had only bought Clara and him more entitlement. I reached for my mug and traced the dried coffee ring that stained the page. Once, I thought it was nothing more than an accident, a mark of carelessness. But that night, it became something else entirely. A circle without end. A prison I had built with my own devotion. For the first time I whispered, "Enough," not as a moment of despair, but as a declaration. The next morning, I walked to the closet. The pink dress still hung between my coats, its fabric shimmering under the muted light. I touched it lightly. Once it symbolized pride, a dream fulfilled. Now, it was nothing but evidence of how far I had fallen. I closed the door firmly. By afternoon, I noticed my phone buzzing again. This time, it wasn't social media posts. It was Clara. Her voice, stripped of sugar, cracked with panic. "The mortgage on the villa, $33 million. It's overdue. Where is the money?" I didn't scramble as I once would have. I didn't apologize or rush to promise help. Instead, I let the silence stretch until her breathing grew ragged. Finally, I answered, calm and steady. "You mean no one told you?" The line went quiet, then broke with her gasp. "What do you mean by that?" she demanded, her tone sharp with fear. I ended the call without explaining. My hand didn't tremble this time. For years, Clara had assumed I was powerless, a woman whose only function was to write checks. But in her panic, I discovered something she had never seen. Silence could be stronger than submission. That night, I slept. Not because the pain was gone, but because the balance had shifted. I was no longer the woman begging for a seat at my son's table. I was the woman who had finally stood up from her own, and in that quiet, I knew I had just taken the first step toward reclaiming my life. 3 days after the wedding, the phone rang again. Clara's name flashed across the screen, her persistence cutting through the quiet of my house. For a moment, I considered letting it ring, but something inside urged me to answer, not out of duty, but out of curiosity. Her voice was jagged with fear this time. Tess, the mortgage on the villa is overdue. 33 million. They're calling in the payment. We need the transfer right now. Where is it? I pressed the phone to my ear but did not rush to soothe her. I let her words hang heavy, savoring the silence that followed. Finally, I repeated the same phrase, slower this time, each word deliberate. You mean, no one told you? Her gasp was sharp, brittle like glass cracking. What do you mean by that? Evan said you were handling it. The broker called. The bank is threatening foreclosure. You can't let this happen. I thought back to her earlier cruelty, her sneer as she told me I didn't matter. Now her panic was almost theatrical. A performance designed to drag me back into my old role of rescuer. But I refused to step onto that stage again. Clara, I said evenly. 3 days ago, you made it very clear I wasn't part of your circle of people who matter. I won't explain myself beyond that. I, 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 Clara, her tone shifted, desperate turning to accusation. So, this is your fault. You forgot the transfer. You let it slip. If this falls apart, it's on you. I looked around my kitchen, the afternoon light spilling across the tiled floor, illuminating the coffee ring that had become my symbol. No, I replied softly. It is not on me. It is on those who assumed I would always give, always comply, always sacrifice. On the other end, I heard movement, perhaps pacing, perhaps her fury breaking through. Evan will call you, she snapped. He'll make you understand. Then the line went dead. For years, her approval or disapproval had dictated the rhythm of my days, sending my pulse racing with every demand. But not now. My calm was new, steady, like the first breath after a storm. That evening, Evan did send a message. Mom, Kara's upset. We need you to fix this. I stared at it, remembering the feverish boy I once held through long nights, the child I had sacrificed for. But that boy was gone, replaced by a man who allowed his wife's hunger to devour him. I didn't reply. My silence was my answer. The knock on my door came hard, not like a visitor, but like someone trying to claim ownership. When I opened it, Evan stood there, Clara clinging to his arm. Behind them, 2 strangers waited. A man in a polished suit with a lawyer's briefcase, and another in a crisp jacket introducing himself as a realtor. Mom, Evan began, his eyes darting away from mine. We need to talk. Clara stepped forward, her voice sharp with authority. You've put us in a difficult position, Tess. The villa depends on you. If you just sign these papers, everything will be resolved. The lawyer slid open his case, spreading out documents with mechanical precision. This is a power of attorney, and an agreement to co-sign the mortgage, he explained, his tone professional but cold. Routine, really. With your signature, we can save the villa before the bank intervenes. The realtor added his sales pitch, all smooth edges and false charm. This property is prime. Time is of the essence, Mrs. Marlowe. Sign now, and your family will be protected. I looked at them, all the lawyer's expectant eyes, the realtor's polished smile, Clara's mask of superiority, Evan's silent plea. They were circling like vultures, convinced the prey had no fight left. I reached for the stack of papers, my fingers brushing the pen they had placed in front of me. Slowly, I flipped through the dense paragraphs, the legal jargon meant to confuse, the clauses designed to trap. Each page whispered the same truth. This wasn't about saving a villa. It was about erasing me. My hand stilled on the final page. Then, without breaking eye contact with Clara, I closed the folder, lifted it, and dropped it into the small wastebasket beside my chair. The sound of crumpling paper was louder than any shout. Cara's face twisted. "What are you doing?" she shrieked. "I am not signing away my life," I said, my voice steady, almost calm. This house, my accounts, my decisions, they are mine. I will not hand them over to people who call themselves family only when they need something. The lawyer frowned. "Mrs. Marlowe, refusing could have consequences. If your capacity comes into question, the court may intervene. This is your opportunity to avoid embarrassment." I leaned forward slightly, my tone cutting. Embarrassment is believing money entitles you to strip someone of their dignity. I suggest you leave my home. Evan's lips trembled, his voice breaking. "Mom, please, do this for me." I turned to him, seeing not my son but a man pleading for my chains. "No, Evan. What's at stake isn't your villa. It's my freedom, and I will not trade it." The morning after their attempted ambush, I walked into the bank where I had kept my accounts for decades. The familiar smell of polished wood and faint paper dust wrapped around me. Mr. Patel, the branch director, rose from his desk the moment he saw me. He had known Robert and me back when Evan was still in grade school. His calm presence was the first kindness I'd felt in weeks. "Mrs. Marlowe," he said gently, "how can I help you today?" I folded my hands in front of me. "I need to secure my accounts. I've discovered attempts to file documents giving others authority over my finances. I never signed such papers." He listened closely, then leaned forward. "You're right to act quickly. We have a program called Senior Safeguard Hold. It allows us to freeze any suspicious withdrawals or powers of attorney until you personally approve them. Would you like to implement it?" "Yes," I said firmly. "Immediately." Mr. Patel hesitated, then slid a folder across the desk. There was, in fact, a request submitted last week for a power of attorney in your name. It looked irregular, so we held it. He opened the page, revealing a blurred copy of a signature that mimicked mine but only faintly. I studied it, my chest tightening, not with fear, but with clarity. "That is not mine," I said flatly. "Someone tried to steal not just money, but my voice." Mr. Patel nodded gravely. "We'll report this as fraud, and we can restructure your accounts so that no one but you will ever have access." As I signed the new documents, my hand did not shake. For the first time in years, my signature felt deliberate, unshaken, reclaimed. It wasn't just ink on paper, it was a statement. I belonged to myself again. When I walked out into the crisp autumn air, sunlight touched my face. I breathed deeply, almost surprised by how light I felt. For so long, I had carried the weight of being everyone's rescuer, as though my resources were infinite, my sacrifices bottomless. That ended today. Back at home, I gathered the stacks of old receipts and bills from the kitchen drawer. Line after line proved how much of my life had been poured into their debts, not mine. I fed each page into the shredder, listening as the machine hummed like applause. By the time the last sheet disappeared, silence filled the room. Not empty silence, but clean, victorious silence. And for the first time in years, I felt something return to me. Control. It surprised me how quickly the world shifted once I began saying no. For years, I thought I was alone, an old woman silenced by those who claimed to love me. But the moment I stood firm, allies began to reveal themselves. It started with a knock on my door. My neighbor, Nora, stood there holding her phone. Her eyes were steady, her voice low. "Tess, I think you should see this." She tapped the screen, and a grainy video from her door camera appeared. The footage showed Evan pacing near my driveway under the cover of night. Clara whispered furiously at his side, her gestures sharp, frantic. Moments later, Vince Calder, the realtor from their little performance in my living room, appeared, his car idling by the curb. They huddled together, pointing toward my house, as though mapping a siege. Then, just as quickly, they vanished into the dark. When the video ended, I looked at Nora, my throat tight. "Would you be willing to share this with my lawyer?" "Of course," she said without hesitation. "I've been through something like this myself. When people try to erase your voice, evidence is your armor. Let me help you wear it." Her words settled over me like a warm blanket. For so long, I had believed kindness was one-sided, something I gave until I was emptied. But here was proof that real kindness still existed: generosity without expectation. Later that week, another unexpected ally emerged. Mr. Benson, the pharmacist who had filled my prescriptions for years, asked me to step into his consultation room. His voice shook as he confessed. "Clara asked me to sign a statement saying you were confused about your medications. She said it was just for insurance." I signed without thinking, but it's been eating at me ever since. I studied him, the guilt in his eyes undeniable. "You can still make it right," I said quietly. He nodded, relief flooding his face. "I'll prepare an affidavit. I'll swear under oath that you've always managed your prescriptions perfectly. They won't use me against you again." That night, Harper, my attorney, gathered everything: Nora's video, Benson's confession, Patel's discovery of forged signatures. Piece by piece, the cage Clara had tried to build around me was cracking. For years they had assumed I was weak, silent, defenseless. But the truth was turning. Allies stood beside me, proof stacked higher with every day. I was no longer a woman waiting to be rescued. I was a woman building her defense, brick by brick. The invitation arrived folded in thick cream paper, Cara's handwriting flowing across the front with artificial grace. "Dinner. Let's put the past behind us." I almost laughed when I read it. Peace had never been her aim. Control had always been the real prize. But still, I accepted. Sometimes the only way to expose the truth is to let it reveal itself in its own arrogance. That evening, I chose a simple navy dress. I didn't want to look desperate, nor did I want to look defeated. I wanted to walk into that room with nothing more than myself, unadorned, unashamed. Before leaving, I tucked a small recorder into my purse, its red light hidden under the flap. Harper's words echoed in my ear. Don't confront them outright. Let them talk. The greedy always reveal themselves. The restaurant Clara picked was designed to intimidate. Polished floors, chandeliers glowing with false warmth, waiters gliding like shadows. Evan was already seated when I arrived, his hand wrapped around a wine glass he hadn't touched, his shoulders hunched, as if he carried an invisible weight. Clara sat beside him, glowing with forced elegance, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. Tess, she said, rising slightly. I'm so glad you came. Tonight is about family, about forgiveness. I took my seat slowly, laying my purse carefully on the table so the recorder could catch every word. Forgiveness, I repeated, is not demanded. It is earned. At first, the conversation flowed like a rehearsed play. Clara complimented my hair, asked about my garden, even feigned interest in the library where I once worked. Evan mumbled questions about my health, his eyes darting away each time I tried to meet them. I smiled, nodded, let them think I was softened by their performance. But masks slip under pressure. Halfway through the meal, Clara leaned forward, her voice dropping into a tone that was less polished, more urgent. You know, Tess, the villa isn't just a house. It's the future. Without your cooperation, everything we've built will collapse. Surely, you don't want your son's life ruined. I tilted my head. I was under the impression the villa was already secure. Isn't that what you told me before? Evan winced, his voice trembling. Mom, please. We need you to sign. The bank won't move forward without you. Without your help, everything falls apart. The thin veneer of reconciliation cracked wide open. Kara's words grew sharper, slipping past her smile. We didn't mean to hurt you with the wedding. It was just complicated. But now is the time to move past it. All we need is your signature. And there it was, the truth laid bare. Not family, not forgiveness. Just the hunger for what I had, wrapped in polite words and feigned affection. I folded my napkin neatly and set it on the table. Thank you for dinner, I said, standing. My voice was calm, almost gentle. It has been very enlightening. As I walked out into the cool night air, the recorder in my purse hummed quietly, holding every word of their betrayal. For the first time, I felt no fear. I had proof, and proof was power. The courthouse carried the weight of every secret, every betrayal, its air thick with the scent of old paper and polished wood. I entered slowly, Harper at my side, her binder of evidence clutched firmly like a weapon. My steps echoed, steady, reminding me that I was no longer a victim shuffling into the shadows, but a woman ready to face her betrayers head on. Across the aisle, Evan sat in a too large suit, his tie crooked, his face pale. He looked down at his hands, never daring to meet my eyes. Beside him, Clara was rigid, her smile tight, brittle, and rehearsed. Their lawyer, Mr. Roar leaned close to whisper, the corners of his mouth bent with false confidence. When the case was called, Harper stood. Her voice carried calm strength. She told the judge that this petition was nothing more than an attempt to strip me of control, that I was not incompetent but exploited, and that the very foundation of their argument was fraud. Roar sprang up in reply, spouting half-truths dressed as concern. He painted me as a confused old woman, too fragile to manage my own life. Each word was designed to chip away at my dignity. I sat tall, my eyes fixed on Judge Ramirez, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing me falter. Then Harper opened the binder. First came Mr. Benson's affidavit, a confession that I had always handled my medications properly, undoing Clara's attempt to brand me as unstable. Then Nora's video played on the screen, capturing Evan, Clara, and Calder whispering near my driveway in the dark, plotting like thieves. Next, Mr. Patel described the forged power of attorney, his testimony crisp and damning. He explained how the notary's seal had been faked, how the handwriting didn't match my own. After that, Harper revealed a series of emails connecting Clara's family and Calder, exposing their plan to profit from the villa's mortgage. And then, the final strike. The recording from the dinner. Clara's voice spilled across the room, polished tones stripped bare by desperation as she admitted the villa could not survive without my signature. Evan's voice followed, low and pleading, begging me to sign away my freedom. The silence afterward was suffocating. Judge Ramirez leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. When Dr. Keating appeared by video to confirm my mental clarity, the last of their facade crumbled. The gavel struck once. The guardianship was denied. Worse for them, the evidence of forgery was referred to the district attorney. I glanced at Evan. His shoulders collapsed, his face a portrait of shame. Beside him, Clara's mask cracked, her fury barely contained, and I sat still, my heart calm, not triumphant, not jubilant, just certain. This was justice, and it was mine. The days after the trial passed in a quiet I had not known in years. It was not the silence of abandonment, but the kind that follows a storm, when the air feels washed clean. Evan and Clara disappeared into their own ruined foreclosure notices, investigations, whispered gossip that followed them wherever they went. I did not seek to know more. Their fall was their own doing. I focused instead on reclaiming my life. One afternoon I opened the closet, where the pink dress still hung. The fabric glimmered faintly in the light, no longer a reminder of humiliation but of survival. I carefully folded it into a box and drove it to a local charity. A week later, I received a letter from a young bride who had chosen it for her wedding. She wrote that, wearing it, made her feel beautiful and hopeful, as though her future were bright. As I read her words, tears filled my eyes, not of grief, but of release. That dress, once a symbol of my exclusion, had become a gift of new beginnings. It was no longer mine to carry. It belonged to someone who would wear it with joy, not shame. I began painting again, something Robert had always encouraged me to do. Each brushstroke was an act of defiance against the years I had surrendered to sacrifice. Friends invited me for coffee, neighbors dropped by with their stories, and I realized how many people had been waiting for me to lift my head. One evening, as the sun dipped low, I sat on my porch with Robert's old wedding ring turning in my hand. I whispered into the fading light, I stood up, Robert. I finally stood up. The ring gleamed, not as a chain, but as a reminder of the love that had once anchored me and the strength that love had left behind. Looking back, I understood the lesson carved out of my pain. Love is not proven by emptying yourself until nothing remains. Devotion without respect becomes exploitation, and silence, if left too long, becomes permission for others to take what is not theirs. For years, I believed being a good mother meant endless giving, but motherhood is not martyrdom. A parent's worth does not vanish when a child grows, nor does it exist only in money or sacrifice. Respect must flow both ways, or else it isn't family, it's bondage. Now, when I think of Evan, I no longer see only the boy I raised. I see the man who chose to betray me. I grieve for him, but I do not carry his sins as my own. His choices were his. Mine was finally saying no. The dress was the same, but I was not. And as I closed the door that evening, the lesson was clear. Boundaries are not walls of cruelty, they are doors of dignity. And sometimes, the greatest act of love is learning when to close them.